The gunshot that rang out across the Montana Territory that summer morning in 1878 was not meant to kill, but it changed everything nonetheless. Eliza Thornton dropped to her knees in the dust outside her father's mercantile, her hands pressed against the wooden planks of the boardwalk as the echo of the shot faded into the vast prairie beyond. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and when she looked up, she saw him for the first time, really saw him, the cowboy who had just fired his revolver into the air to scatter the spooked horses that had nearly trampled her into the street. "Are you hurt, miss?" His voice carried the rough edge of someone who spent more time talking to cattle than people, but there was genuine concern threaded through those words. Eliza pushed herself to standing, her green calico dress now coated with the fine Montana dust that seemed to settle on everything in the town of Broken Creek. She was 20 years old, with hair the color of autumn wheat and eyes that her mother had always said were too clever for her own good. Those eyes now fixed on the stranger who had likely just saved her life. "I am unharmed, thanks to you," she managed, brushing off her skirts with more force than necessary, embarrassed by her moment of vulnerability. The cowboy holstered his weapon and stepped closer, removing his wide-brimmed hat to reveal sandy brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He was tall, lean in the way of men who made their living in the saddle, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the pale blue of a Montana sky in winter. Eliza guessed he was perhaps 24 or 25, old enough to have that look of someone who had seen the harder edges of frontier life, but young enough that hope had not yet been fully beaten out of him. "Name is Nathaniel Brennan, miss. Folks call me Nate." He twisted his hat in his hands, a gesture that might have seemed nervous on another man but on him just seemed polite. "Eliza Thornton." She extended her hand, and when he took it, his palm was calloused and warm. "My father owns the mercantile, I know." The corner of his mouth lifted in something that was not quite a smile. "Been in twice this week to buy supplies. Saw you behind the counter both times." Heat crept up Eliza's neck, though she could not say exactly why. "I do not recall seeing you." "That is because you were busy with the ledgers." He settled his hat back on his head. "You get this look when you are working with numbers, like you are solving some great mystery. I thought it best not to interrupt." Before Eliza could formulate a response to this unexpected observation, her father burst through the mercantile door, his face flushed with alarm. "Eliza, I heard a shot." "I am fine, Papa. This gentleman prevented what could have been a terrible accident." She gestured toward Nate, who straightened under her father's scrutiny. William Thornton was a man who had come west after the war, determined to build something solid in a place where everything seemed temporary. He had a merchant's eye for evaluating people, and Eliza watched that evaluation happen in the space of a few heartbeats. "Then you have my gratitude, Mr. Brennan, sir, Nate Brennan. I work for the Double R Ranch about 8 miles north. I know the outfit. Run by Robert Randall, good man." Her father nodded slowly. "You are welcome to supper tonight, Mr. Brennan. It is the least we can offer after what you have done." Eliza opened her mouth to protest, not because she objected to Nate's presence, but because her father rarely issued invitations without consulting her mother first, and that meant something significant. But Nate spoke before she could. "That is generous of you, sir, but I would not want to impose." "Nonsense. 6 o'clock. We live above the store." Her father's tone made it clear this was not truly a request, and with that, he ushered Eliza back inside, leaving Nate standing in the street looking both pleased and slightly bewildered. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Eliza's mother, Catherine, took the news of an unexpected dinner guest with her usual unflappable grace, immediately beginning preparations for a meal that would be substantial enough to honor the debt they owed. Eliza found herself relegated to the tasks of setting the table and arranging wildflowers in a mason jar, her mind wandering repeatedly to the cowboy with the winter sky eyes. "He is handsome, this Mr. Brennan." Her mother asked the question casually as she rolled out biscuit dough, but Eliza knew better than to think it was idle curiosity. I suppose he is. Eliza kept her attention fixed on the arrangement of black-eyed Susans and prairie coneflowers. I did not take particular notice. MMM. Catherine made a sound that conveyed complete disbelief. Your father says he works for the Double R. That is a good ranch. Mr. Randall pays his men fairly and does not tolerate the sort of roughness that some outfits do. Eliza understood what her mother was really saying. In a territory where single women were scarce and marriageable prospects even scarcer, a steady cowboy from a reputable ranch was not something to dismiss lightly. But Eliza had never been particularly interested in the parade of potential suitors who had passed through Broken Creek. She had her work in the mercantile, her books ordered from catalogs back east, and her dreams of perhaps one day seeing San Francisco or even New York. Marriage had always seemed like something that would require her to make herself smaller, quieter, more accommodating than she had any desire to be. When Nate arrived that evening, freshly washed and wearing what was clearly his best shirt, Eliza felt an unexpected flutter in her chest that she firmly told herself was simply residual nerves from the morning's near accident. He brought a bundle wrapped in brown paper, which he presented to her mother with a slight bow. My mother always said never to arrive empty-handed, he explained. It is just some honey from a fellow at the ranch who keeps bees, but I thought you might like it. Catherine accepted the gift with genuine pleasure, and Eliza watched as Nate charmed both her parents over the course of the meal with stories of ranch life that were self-deprecating and funny without being crass. He spoke of cattle drives and stubborn horses, of sleeping under stars so thick they looked like spilled salt, of the particular challenge of keeping a campfire going in Montana wind. He asked her father about the mercantile business with real interest, and he complimented her mother's cooking with such sincerity that Catherine actually blushed. What surprised Eliza most was that he also directed questions to her, and they were not the usual vapid inquiries about needlework or recipes. Instead, he asked what she read, what she thought of the territorial governor's latest policies, whether she believed the railroad expansion would help or hurt small towns like Broken Creek. His attention was focused and genuine, and Eliza found herself responding with more animation than she had intended, her usual careful reserve slipping away. I think the railroad will bring changes whether we like it or not, she said, gesturing with her fork in a way that would have horrified her finishing school teachers back in Ohio. The question is whether places like Broken Creek can adapt or whether we will simply be swallowed up by wherever the tracks lead. You make it sound like the railroad is a living thing, something with intention. Nate leaned back in his chair, considering, but maybe you are right. Maybe progress is like that, something that moves whether we want it to or not. And what do you think, Mr. Brennan? Are you in favor of progress? I think, he said slowly, that some things should change and some things should stay exactly as they are. The trick is knowing which is which. His eyes met hers across the table, and Eliza felt that flutter again, stronger this time, undeniable. After supper, her father invited Nate to smoke on the small balcony that overlooked Main Street, and Eliza helped her mother clear the dishes, very aware of the low murmur of male voices drifting through the open window. He is a good man, Catherine said quietly. You can see it in how he carries himself. Mama, it was just dinner. Of course it was. Her mother handed her a plate to dry. But your father and I will not be here forever, Eliza. This territory is hard on women alone. I am hardly alone. I have you and Papa, and I can run the mercantile as well as any man. I know you can, darling, but being capable and being happy are not always the same thing. Eliza wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat because she could not say with complete honesty that she was happy. Content, yes. Secure in her role and her abilities, certainly. But happy? That was a more complicated question. When Nate took his leave that night, he thanked them all with simple courtesy, but at the door, he turned to Eliza specifically. "I would like to call on you, Miss Thornton, if you would permit it." The request was traditional, formal even, but the way he looked at her was not. There was something searching in his gaze, as if he was asking a much larger question than whether he could visit. "I would permit it," Eliza heard herself say, and his resulting smile transformed his entire face. Over the following weeks, Nate became a regular presence in Eliza's life. He would ride into town on his days off, always finding some excuse to stop at the mercantile, whether to buy tobacco or nails or simply to browse the seed catalog while Eliza worked. He was unfailingly polite, never presuming too much, but his interest was clear. They took walks along the creek that gave the town its name, Nate leading his horse while Eliza picked her way along the rocky bank. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 16 and making his way west, because there was nothing left to hold him in the place where they were buried. She told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her father's decision to relocate after the war, about her own dreams of seeing more of the world beyond Montana territory. "Why have you not gone then?" Nate asked one afternoon as they sat on a fallen log, watching the water slip past. "If you want to see San Francisco or New York, what is stopping you?" Eliza considered the question. "Fear, I suppose, and obligation. My parents need me in the store. And perhaps the worry that if I left, I would not find what I was looking for, and then I would have given up what I have for nothing. That is a reasonable fear." Nate picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in his palm. "But it is also a reason to never do anything at all. And you? Do you plan to remain a ranch hand forever?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I have been saving my wages. Mr. Randall has land he would be willing to sell, about 200 acres with good water. It would be enough for a small operation, my own cattle. It would take years to build into something substantial, but it would be mine." The way he said that last word with such naked longing made Eliza's chest ache. "That sounds like a good dream. Dreams are only worth something if you can share them with someone." He looked at her then, and the meaning in his eyes was unmistakable, but Eliza was not ready to hear that meaning, not yet. She stood, brushing off her skirts. "We should head back. Mama will worry." If Nate was disappointed by her deflection, he did not show it. He simply stood as well, offering his arm with that same gentle courtesy that characterized everything he did. As summer deepened into August, Nate's visits became the rhythm by which Eliza measured her weeks. She found herself watching for him, listening for the particular cadence of his horse's hooves on the packed dirt of Main Street. When he appeared, something in her chest loosened, as if she had been holding her breath without realizing it. They attended the town dance together, and Eliza discovered that Nate could waltz surprisingly well for a cowboy. "My mother insisted," he explained, guiding her through the turns with confidence. "She said a man should know how to dance, even if the opportunity rarely arose." "Your mother was a wise woman. She was." His hand tightened slightly on her waist. "I wish you could have met her. She would have liked you." "How can you be certain?" "Because she valued intelligence and independence. She always said those were the qualities that mattered, not just beauty, though you have that as well." Eliza missed a step, flustered by the compliment, but Nate caught her smoothly, and they continued as if nothing had happened. When September arrived and the first hints of autumn began to paint the cottonwoods gold, Nate asked Eliza to accompany him on a ride out to the Double R. "I want you to see it," he said. "The land I am hoping to buy, I want to know what you think." It was a request freighted with implication, and Eliza knew it. But curiosity won out over caution, and she agreed, securing her mother's grudging permission with the promise that they would return before dark. The land was beautiful in the way that Montana could be beautiful. All vast sky and rolling hills covered in prairie grass that moved like water in the wind. Nate showed her the creek that ran through the property, the natural depression that would be perfect for a house sheltered from winter storms, the meadow where cattle could graze. His enthusiasm was infectious, And Eliza found herself imagining it too, seeing not just what was but what could be. It would take time, Nate said, his eyes scanning the horizon. Years, probably, building a house, buying stock, establishing a herd. It would be hard work and there would be lean times. You are trying to talk me out of something, Eliza observed, but I am not certain what. He turned to face her fully. Eliza, I know we have only known each other a few months. I know that is not very long by most standards, but I also know that I think about you every moment I am not with you. I know that when something happens, good or bad, you are the first person I want to tell. I know that when I imagine this place built up into something real, you are there in every vision. Her heart was beating so hard she was certain he could hear it. Nate, I am not asking you for an answer right now, he said quickly. I know I do not have much to offer yet. But I am asking if you think, maybe someday you could see yourself building this with me, as my wife. The word hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and thrilling all at once. Eliza's mind raced. Marriage meant giving up her independence, her dreams of travel, her certainty about who she was and what she wanted. But it also meant this land and this man and this vision of a future that suddenly seemed more real than anything she had imagined before. I do not know, she said honestly. I care for you, Nate, more than I expected to, but I do not know if I am ready for what you are asking. Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment perhaps, but he nodded. That is fair. I would not want you to say yes unless you were certain, but will you think about it? Will you give me a chance to prove that I can give you a life worth having? Yes, Eliza said. I will think about it. They rode back to town in a silence that was not uncomfortable but was heavy with unspoken things. When he left her at the mercantile, Nate tipped his hat and said simply, I will wait, Eliza, however long it takes. She believed him. The first harvest came and went. The farmers brought in their wheat and the double R drove cattle to market. Nate continued to visit, but there was a new patience to his courtship now, as if he had laid his cards on the table and was content to let her examine them at her own pace. Eliza threw herself into her work, expanding the mercantile's inventory and negotiating better prices with suppliers. She told herself she was building something valuable, proving her worth. But in the quiet moments, she wondered if she was just avoiding the decision that loomed over everything. Her parents did not press her, though her mother's meaningful looks spoke volumes. Other young men made tentative approaches, drawn by Eliza's competence and her father's growing wealth, but she turned them all away with polite disinterest. None of them were Nate, and that was becoming a problem. Winter settled over Montana with brutal efficiency. Snow piled high in the streets, and the temperature dropped low enough that the water in the barrels outside the mercantile froze solid. Nate's visits became less frequent, limited by weather and the demands of keeping livestock alive through the bitter months. But he sent letters, pages filled with descriptions of his days and questions about hers, and Eliza found herself responding with a candor she rarely allowed herself in person. She wrote about her frustrations with the narrow scope of her life, about her fear that marriage would make her invisible in the way she had seen other women become invisible. She wrote about her dreams and her doubts, and he wrote back with understanding rather than judgment. I do not want you to disappear, he wrote in one letter that arrived in February, delivered by a ranch hand who had braved the snow to bring supplies to town. I want you exactly as you are. If you married me, you would still be Eliza, still brilliant with numbers, still opinionated and independent. I would not want to change that, even if I could. What I am offering is partnership, not ownership. She kept that letter in her apron pocket and read it so many times the paper grew soft. When spring finally broke through in April, Nate was among the first to ride into town, his face ruddy from the wind but his smile warm. I missed you, he said simply, and Eliza realized with a start that she had missed him too, deeply and constantly. They fell back into their pattern of walks and conversations, but now there was an undercurrent of urgency. Time was passing. Nate had made his intentions clear, and Eliza knew she could not keep him in limbo forever. It would not be fair. But every time she tried to formulate an answer, fear stopped her tongue. What if she said yes and regretted it? What if she said no and regretted that even more? The second harvest approached with alarming speed. The summer of 1879 was hot and dry, and everyone worried about the wheat. But the rains came at the right times, and the crop was good, and when the farmers celebrated, Eliza watched from the sidelines and felt the weight of another year passing. Nate had been true to his word, patient beyond reason, but she could see the strain it was taking. He looked older somehow, though he could not yet be more than 26. There were lines around his eyes that had not been there before. One evening in late September, as they walked along the creek, he said quietly, "Eliza, I need to know if I am wasting my time." She stopped, stung. "You think this has been a waste?" "No." He turned to face her, and his expression was raw. "No, knowing you could never be a waste, but I am not going to wait forever for someone who is never going to choose me. I need to know if there is a possibility, a real one, or if I should start trying to move on. Nate, I have been patient. I think I have proven that I am serious, that this is not some passing fancy, but you have to give me something, Eliza, some indication that this could lead somewhere." She wanted to say yes. The word was right there, but it would not come. "I need more time." How much time? I do not know. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them there was a resignation there that broke her heart. "All right, I will give you until next harvest, 1 more year." "But Eliza, that is all I can do. I cannot live my whole life in this uncertainty." "That is fair," she whispered. He nodded, then reached out and cupped her face in his hand with such tenderness that tears pricked her eyes. "I love you. I think I have loved you since the moment you looked up at me from that dusty street. But love is not enough if it is only coming from one side. I do care for you. I know." He dropped his hand. "But caring is not the same as being willing to take a risk." They walked back in silence, and when they parted, Eliza felt as if something had shifted irrevocably. She had asked for time, and he had given it, but they both knew this was the end of something, even if they did not yet know what would begin. That winter was the longest of Eliza's life. Nate's letters stopped coming, and though he still visited occasionally, there was a new guardedness to him. He was polite, friendly even, but the openness that had characterized their relationship was gone. He was protecting himself, and she could not blame him. Her mother finally lost patience in January of 1880, cornering Eliza in the storeroom behind the mercantile. "You are going to lose him, I know. And you are content with that." "I do not know," Eliza said miserably. "I do not know what I want." "Yes, you do." Catherine's voice was sharp. "You want safety. You want guarantees that do not exist. You want to know that if you take this leap, everything will be perfect. But that is not how life works, Eliza. Sometimes you have to jump and trust that you will find your footing." "What if I cannot be what he needs?" "What if you are exactly what he needs, and he is exactly what you need, but you are too afraid to find out?" Eliza had no answer for that. Spring came again, the third spring since Nate had first asked his question. The land thawed, and the town came back to life, and Eliza felt as if she was watching everything from a great distance. She went through the motions of her days, helped her father with inventory, smiled at customers, balanced the books. But inside she was hollow. Nate's visits dwindled to almost nothing. She heard through town gossip that he had been spending time with a widow who ran a boarding house in the next county, a woman named Margaret who was practical and pleasant and perfectly suitable. The news hit Eliza like a physical blow, but she told herself she had no right to jealousy. She had made her choice by refusing to make a choice. Summer arrived, and with it came the usual preparations for harvest. Eliza helped her father stock extra supplies for the influx of seasonal workers, and she tried not to think about deadlines or ultimatums or winter sky eyes that did not look at her anymore. Then, in August, her father collapsed behind the counter. It was a stroke, the doctor said. Not fatal, but serious. William Thornton was alive but paralyzed on his left side, his speech slurred and difficult. Catherine was stoic in the face of disaster, but Eliza could see the fear beneath her mother's composure. "We will manage," Catherine said firmly. "You will run the store, and I will care for your father." And so Eliza did, working from dawn until long after dark, handling every aspect of the business that her father could no longer manage. It was exhausting and overwhelming, and in the midst of it, she realized that this was what her life would be now. Not by choice, but by necessity. Her parents needed her. The business needed her. There was no room for anything else. She did not see Nate at all through those weeks. She heard he had been away, taking cattle to market in Wyoming. But in early September, as she was closing the store one evening, he appeared in the doorway. "I heard about your father," he said. "I am so sorry." "Thank you." She could not quite meet his eyes. "He is improving slowly." "And you? Are you managing?" "I am doing what needs to be done." He stepped closer, and she caught the familiar scent of leather and sage that always clung to him. "Eliza, if you need help—" "I am fine." The words came out sharper than she intended. "We are fine. You do not need to concern yourself." She saw him flinch, and she hated herself for it. But she could not afford to be vulnerable right now, could not afford to let him back in when she was already stretched so thin. "All right." His voice was careful, neutral. "But the offer stands. If you need anything, send word." He left, and Eliza locked the door behind him, then leaned against it and let herself cry for the first time since her father had fallen. September bled into October. The harvest came in strong and the farmers were jubilant, but Eliza barely noticed. She was trapped in a cycle of work and worry. Her world narrowed to the mercantile and the sickroom where her father slowly regained his strength. Then one afternoon, Margaret, the widow from the next county, came into the store. She was attractive in a comfortable sort of way, with brown hair streaked with early gray and a calm, capable air. She ordered supplies with quiet efficiency, and as Eliza filled the order, Margaret said conversationally, "You must be Eliza Thornton. Nate has spoken of you." Eliza's hands stilled on the bag of flour she was measuring. "Has he? Quite a bit, actually." Margaret's smile was kind but knowing. "He is a good man, I am sure you know that. I do. I want you to know I have no intention of accepting his proposal should he offer one." Eliza looked up sharply. "I do not understand." Margaret leaned against the counter, her expression gentle. "He is in love with you, Miss Thornton. Anyone with eyes can see it. He is spending time with me because he is trying to move forward, but his heart is not in it. And I am too old to settle for being someone's second choice." Eliza did not know what to say. "I do not pretend to know your circumstances or why you have not said yes to him. I am sure you have your reasons. But if one of those reasons is that you think he has moved on, you should know that he has not. He is just very, very tired of waiting." Margaret paid for her supplies and left, and Eliza stood in the empty store, her heart pounding. That night, after her parents were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table and forced herself to confront the truth she had been avoiding for 3 years. She was terrified. Terrified of losing herself, of making the wrong choice, of stepping into the unknown. But she was also miserable. The safe, controlled life she had been clinging to was suffocating her, and she loved Nate. She had loved him for a long time, possibly since that first dinner when he had asked her real questions and listened to her answers as if they mattered. She had just been too afraid to admit it. Her father's illness had shown her how quickly everything could change, how illusory control really was. She could plan and prepare and protect herself, but there were no guarantees. The only real choice was whether to take risks on things that mattered or to spend her life avoiding them. Nate mattered. He mattered more than her fear. The third harvest was nearly complete. October was half over and the aspens on the hillsides were burning gold. Time was running out. Eliza made her decision. She left her mother in charge of the store, something Catherine was well capable of doing now that William was recovering, and she rode out to the Double R on a borrowed horse. Her heart was in her throat the entire way, terrified that she had waited too long, that Nate's patience had finally run out. When she arrived at the ranch, one of the hands directed her to the northern pasture, where Nate was working on fence repairs. She rode out slowly, rehearsing what she would say, but when she saw him, all her prepared words evaporated. He was bent over a post, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hat pushed back. When he heard the horse, he looked up and shock crossed his face. Eliza. She dismounted clumsily, her legs shaking. "I need to talk to you." He set down his tools and walked toward her, wariness in every line of his body. "Is something wrong? Your father?" "Papa is improving. This is not about him." She twisted the reins in her hands, nervous energy needing an outlet. "I have been a coward." "Eliza, no, let me say this." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I have been terrified of losing myself, of making a mistake, of choosing wrong. But I have been so focused on what I might lose that I have not let myself think about what I could gain, what we could gain." He was very still, hardly breathing. "What are you saying?" "I am saying I do not want safe anymore. I do not want the life I have been living, all work and no joy. I want to take risks. I want to build something with someone. She took a breath. "I want you, Nate. I want to marry you. I want to build that ranch and have a life together and be terrified and happy and everything else that comes with it." For a long moment he did not move. Then he closed the distance between them in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms, and she realized he was shaking. "You mean it?" His voice was rough against her hair. "Eliza, you have to mean it. I cannot go through this again if you are going to change your mind." "I mean it." She pulled back enough to look at him, and there were tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I am sorry it took me so long. I am sorry I hurt you, but I mean it now. Yes, my answer is yes." He kissed her then, and it was not gentle or tentative. It was 3 years of waiting and wanting poured into a single moment, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "I love you," she said, and saying it out loud was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. "I have loved you for so long, and I was just too stubborn and scared to admit it. I love you too." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I have loved you since the moment I saw you. I will love you until I die. And I promise you, Eliza, I will spend every day trying to make you glad you said yes." They stood there in the pasture, holding each other as the autumn wind moved through the grass, and Eliza felt something she had not felt in years, maybe ever. She felt free. They rode back to town together, and Nate came inside to speak to her parents. William, still recovering but getting stronger every day, gave his blessing with tears in his eyes. Catherine hugged Eliza tightly and whispered, "I am so proud of you." They set the wedding for November, wanting to marry before the worst of winter set in. It was a small ceremony at the church in Broken Creek, with the whole town turning out because there was little enough to celebrate on the frontier, and a wedding was always an occasion. Eliza wore her mother's dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried a bouquet of late-blooming asters. When she walked down the aisle and saw Nate waiting for her, looking nervous and happy and so very young despite everything he had been through, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. The minister kept it brief, as frontier preachers tended to do, and when Nate slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, his hand was steady even though hers shook. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Nate kissed her in front of God and everyone, and the church erupted in applause. The reception was held at the boarding house, with food contributed by half the town. There was music and dancing, and Eliza laughed more than she had in 3 years. When Nate waltzed her around the room, she felt light, untethered from all the weight she had been carrying. Happy. He murmured against her ear, "Terrified," she admitted. "But yes, happy." "Good, we will figure out the rest as we go." They spent their wedding night in the small house on Nate's land, the house he had been building slowly over the past 3 years, preparing for a future he had not been certain would arrive. It was simple but sturdy, 2 rooms with a stone fireplace and windows that looked out over the prairie. "It is not much yet," Nate said as he carried her over the threshold, a tradition he insisted on despite her protests that it was unnecessary. "It is perfect," Eliza said, and she meant it. They made love with a tenderness that surprised her, given how long they had waited. Nate was patient and careful, and when he asked if she was all right, she pulled him closer and whispered, "More than all right." Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, and Nate traced patterns on her shoulder with his fingertips. "I still cannot quite believe you are here. That you are mine." "I am not property to be owned," Eliza said, but there was no heat in it. "No, you are not. But you are my wife and I am your husband, and that means we belong to each other. It means we do not have to face anything alone anymore." She turned to look at him, this man who had waited 3 harvests for her answer, who had been patient when she did not deserve patience, who had loved her even when she could not love herself. "I am going to try to be a good wife to you. You already are." He kissed her forehead. "Just do not try to be anything other than who you are. That is all I have ever wanted." The first winter of their marriage was harsh, but they faced it together. Eliza learned to cook on the cast iron stove, producing meals that ranged from edible to surprisingly good. She helped Nate tend the small herd of cattle he had been building, learning to read the weather and the animals with an instinct she had not known she possessed. They read together in the evenings, sharing books from Eliza's collection and arguing cheerfully about plots and characters. They talked about their plans for the ranch, how they would expand slowly, building something sustainable rather than grasping for quick wealth. In January, Eliza realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a complex mix of joy and terror, but when she told Nate, his reaction was pure, uncomplicated delight. A baby. He said it with such wonder, as if she had just told him she had discovered gold in the creek. "Eliza, we are going to have a baby." "You are not frightened?" She searched his face for any hint of the anxiety she felt. "Of course I am frightened. I am terrified. What if I am a terrible father? What if something goes wrong? But I am also happier than I have ever been." His honesty helped. If he could be both scared and happy, then maybe she could be too. The pregnancy was difficult at times. Morning sickness lasted well into the 4th month, and by summer, Eliza felt ungainly and uncomfortable in the heat. But Nate was endlessly patient, rubbing her swollen feet and bringing her cool water from the creek, never complaining about the tasks she could not manage. Catherine visited often, bringing supplies and advice, staying for days at a time to help with the heavier chores. Her father came once, making the trip with difficulty but determined to see the ranch his daughter and son-in-law were building. He was proud, Eliza could see, proud of what they had accomplished. In September of 1881, under another autumn moon, Eliza went into labor. It was long and hard, and there were moments when she was certain she would die, certain that this had all been a terrible mistake. But Catherine was there, steady and calm, and Nate held her hand through every contraction, his face white but his grip firm. When their son finally arrived in the early hours of the morning, howling his displeasure at the world, Eliza felt a love so fierce and immediate it stole her breath. "He is perfect," Nate said, cradling the tiny, angry bundle with surprising confidence. "Eliza, he is perfect." They named him William Nathaniel, after both their fathers, and when they took him to town to be christened a few weeks later, the whole community turned out to welcome the newest resident of Broken Creek. Motherhood transformed Eliza in ways she had not anticipated. She was still herself, still sharp-minded and independent, but there was a new depth to her now, a fierce protectiveness that surprised even her. She learned to balance caring for William with helping run the ranch, discovering reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. The ranch grew slowly but steadily. Nate proved to have a gift for managing livestock, and his reputation for honesty earned him respect among the other ranchers. By the time William was 2, they had expanded the herd significantly and built an addition onto the house, a proper kitchen and a second bedroom. Life was not easy. There were lean seasons when the weather did not cooperate. Times when illness swept through the herd or money was so tight that Eliza lay awake at night calculating and recalculating figures in her head. But they faced everything together, and that made all the difference. In the spring of 1884, Eliza discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news brought less fear and more simple joy. They knew what to expect now, knew they could manage. Their daughter arrived in November, a smaller, quieter baby than William had been. They named her Catherine Rose, and when Eliza's mother held her namesake for the first time, she wept. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with the cattle. Catherine was fierce and independent from the start, more interested in climbing trees than playing with dolls, much to Eliza's amused exasperation. In 1887, they welcomed another son, Samuel, who was cheerful and easygoing, content to toddle after his older siblings and laugh at everything. The house rang with noise and life, and Eliza often thought back to her younger self, that frightened woman who had almost let fear rob her of all this. Nate was a wonderful father, patient and playful and firm when he needed to be. He taught William to ride and rope, showed Catherine how to identify animal tracks, carried Samuel on his shoulders for hours without complaint. Watching him with their children, Eliza fell in love with him all over again. The ranch prospered. They were never wealthy by any standard, but they were comfortable, and that was more than many could say. They became pillars of the community, respected and valued. Eliza served on the school board, using her skill with numbers to keep the finances in order. Nate helped organize roundups and cattle drives, his word trusted by everyone. William Thornton eventually recovered enough to reclaim some of his duties at the mercantile, but he was never quite the same as before the stroke. When he passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1889, Eliza grieved deeply, but also felt gratitude that he had lived long enough to see her happy, to know his grandchildren, to understand that his daughter had found her place. Catherine Thornton moved in with them after William's death, helping with the children and the house, becoming an integral part of their daily life. She was in her element, surrounded by her grandchildren, telling them stories and teaching them songs, and Eliza was grateful for her presence. The children grew. William became tall and lean like his father, with that same quiet competence. Catherine remained fierce and independent, announcing at 12 that she had no intention of ever marrying. She was going to run her own ranch. Samuel was the peacemaker, the one who could make anyone laugh, who smoothed over conflicts with his easy charm. In 1892, when Eliza was 34 and thought her childbearing years were likely behind her, she discovered she was pregnant again. It was a surprise, but not an unwelcome one, and their fourth child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived that winter. Grace was a quiet, dreamy child, content to sit and watch the world with solemn eyes. She was her father's favorite, though Nate would have denied having favorites if asked. But everyone could see how he softened around her, how he would sit for hours letting her braid wildflowers into his hair while he pretended to read. The ranch continued to grow. They bought more land when it became available, expanding their operation until they were running nearly 1,000 head of cattle. It was more work than two people could manage alone, so they hired hands, men Nate trusted, who became like extended family. One of those men was a young cowboy named Jack Murphy, who arrived in 1895 looking for work and a fresh start. He was good with horses and had an easy way with people, and within a year, everyone could see that he was sweet on Catherine, who was now 16 and even more beautiful than her mother had been at that age. Eliza watched with mixed feelings as history seemed to repeat itself. Catherine was cautious, not wanting to rush into anything, and Jack was patient, willing to wait. It was familiar and bittersweet. "She is like you," Nate observed one evening as they watched Catherine and Jack talking by the corral, careful not to stand too close but clearly absorbed in each other. Afraid to take the risk, She is smarter than I was. She is not taking 3 years to make up her mind. Give her time, she will get there, and she did. In the spring of 1897, Catherine announced that she and Jack wanted to marry. The wedding was held at the ranch, a bigger affair than Eliza and Nate's had been, with neighbors coming from miles around. As Eliza watched her daughter dance with her new husband, Nate slipped his arm around her waist. "How are you holding up?" "I am happy for her, and terrified for her, and wishing I could somehow protect her from everything hard that is coming." "You cannot, but you raised her strong. She will be all right." "We did well, did we not?" Eliza leaned into him. "With all of them. We did better than well. We built something good, Eliza, something that will last." He was right. As the years continued to pass, as William took over more of the ranch operations and eventually married a schoolteacher from Miles City, as Samuel decided to become a veterinarian and left for training back east, as Grace grew into a talented artist whose paintings captured the beauty of Montana in ways that made people stop and stare, Eliza saw that what they had built was not just a successful ranch but a family, a legacy. There were hard times still. In 1900, a particularly brutal winter killed nearly a quarter of their herd, and they spent months rebuilding. In 1903, Catherine lost her first baby, and Eliza held her daughter while she wept, helpless in the face of such grief but present, always present. But there were good times too. Grandchildren arrived, boisterous and beautiful, filling the ranch with noise and laughter again. William and his wife had 3 children. Catherine and Jack had 4, despite that early loss. Even Samuel, though he lived back east, sent his 2 children to spend summers in Montana, and Grace eventually married a fellow artist, a gentle man who understood her quiet nature. The 20th century brought changes. Automobiles appeared on the roads, though Nate never fully trusted them. Electricity came to Broken Creek and eventually to the ranch, transforming their evenings. The world was different faster, but some things remained constant. Eliza and Nate grew old together, their hair graying, their movements slower, but their love deepening with every passing year. They still walked along the creek sometimes, moving more carefully now but still finding pleasure in the simple act of being together. One evening in the autumn of 1915, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky gold and crimson. Eliza was 57 now, Nate 62, and they had been married for 34 years. "Do you remember that first autumn?" Nate asked, reaching for her hand. "When you finally said yes?" "Of course I do. I was so terrified. And now I am grateful, grateful that you were patient. Grateful that you loved me enough to wait, grateful that I finally found the courage to take the risk. I would have waited longer if I had to, though I am glad I did not have to." Eliza squeezed his hand. "Sometimes I think about the life I might have had if I had said no. If I had stayed in town, running the mercantile, safe and alone, and I am so grateful I did not choose that. No regrets. Not a single one. Well, perhaps I regret making you wait 3 harvests when I could have said yes that first year and had 3 more years with you. We have had plenty of years. We will have plenty more. Promise? Promise." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, and Eliza thought about everything that had grown from that one terrified yes. 4 children, grandchildren, a ranch that stretched for miles. A life rich with work and love and meaning. She had been so afraid of losing herself, but what she had not understood then was that becoming part of something larger did not mean disappearing. She was still Eliza, still sharp-minded and capable, but now she was also Nate's wife, mother to their children, grandmother to their grandchildren. Each role added rather than subtracted, building layers of identity rather than erasing what had come before. "What are you thinking about?" Nate asked. "How lucky we are, how good this life has been." "It has been good." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "The best I could have imagined." They continued sitting there as darkness fell completely and the autumn moon rose huge and golden over the prairie. Somewhere inside, they could hear Catherine laughing at something Jack said, the deeper voices of their sons-in-law discussing cattle prices, the higher voices of grandchildren playing some elaborate game. The sounds of family, of home, of everything they had built together. Eliza leaned her head on Nate's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, and they watched the moon climb higher into the vast Montana sky. 3 harvests he had waited for her answer, and she had finally said yes under an autumn moon not so different from this one. It had been worth the wait. Every moment of it had been worth the wait. The years that followed were gentle to them. Nate remained strong and capable well into his 60s, still riding out to check on the cattle even when William and the hired hands tried to convince him to take it easy. Eliza remained sharp as ever, keeping the books for the ranch and offering advice to her children and grandchildren with the wisdom of hard-won experience. In 1918, the Spanish flu swept through Montana, as it swept through the world, and the ranch did not escape unscathed. Several of their grandchildren fell ill, and for weeks the house was a place of hushed worry and constant nursing. Eliza and Catherine worked around the clock, applying cool compresses and forcing liquids, praying in the way that people pray when medicine has reached its limits. They all survived, though the youngest, Catherine's son Daniel, came frighteningly close to death. When he finally turned the corner, Catherine collapsed in her mother's arms and sobbed with relief, and Eliza held her daughter the way she had held her children through every crisis, offering the comfort of presence when words were inadequate. Nate was 65 that year, and the strain of those weeks showed on him in new ways. He seemed older suddenly, more fragile, though he denied it when Eliza expressed concern. "I am fine," he insisted. "Just tired, we all are." But Eliza knew him too well to be fooled. She watched him more carefully after that, noting how he moved a bit more slowly, how he sometimes seemed to struggle for breath after exertion. When she suggested he see the doctor in town, he waved her off. "I am an old man, Eliza. Old men slow down. There is nothing wrong with me that time is not doing to everyone. You are not that old. I am old enough." But he smiled when he said it, and he pulled her close. "Stop worrying. I plan to be around annoying you for many more years." She wanted to believe him, and mostly she did. They settled back into their routines, and life continued its steady progression. In the spring of 1920, they celebrated their grandson William Jr.'s marriage, a joyful occasion that brought family from across the state. The wedding was held at the ranch, just as Catherine's had been, and as Eliza watched yet another generation begin their journey together, she felt the weight and wonder of time passing. "We are getting old," she whispered to Nate as they watched the young couple dance. "Speak for yourself." "I am in my prime." But he squeezed her hand gently, acknowledging the truth beneath the joke. That summer was particularly beautiful, with good rains and mild temperatures. The grass grew thick and green, and the cattle were fat and healthy. Eliza spent long hours in her garden, growing vegetables and flowers, finding peace in the simple act of tending growing things. One evening in late July, she and Nate took one of their walks along the creek, following the path they had walked countless times over the decades. The water was running high from mountain snowmelt, the sound of it rushing over rocks a constant music. "I have been thinking," Nate said as they picked their way along the bank, "about the ranch, about what happens after." "After what?" "After we are gone. I know William is running things now, and he is doing a fine job, but I want to make sure everything is set up right, that all the children are taken care of fairly." "Nate, we do not need to talk about this now." "Yes, we do." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I am not being morbid, just practical. I want to know that you will be provided for, that the children will not fight over anything, that everything we built will continue." Eliza studied his face, seeing the lines that life had etched there, the gray in his hair that had once been sandy brown, the eyes that were still that same clear winter blue. "You promise me you are not keeping something from me. You are not sick." "I am not sick. I am just old enough to know that we do not have forever, and I want to make sure everything is in order." He cupped her face in his hand. "I love you, Eliza. I have loved you for over 40 years. I just want to know you will be all right." I will be all right because you will be here with me." But even as she said it, she felt the familiar flutter of fear in her chest, the same fear that had ruled her for so long before she learned to take risks. They made plans anyway, talking to a lawyer in Miles City and drawing up proper documents that laid out clearly how the ranch would be divided, how Catherine would inherit certain parcels, how provisions would be made for all of them. It felt grim and necessary, and Eliza hated every moment of it. But Nate seemed relieved once it was done. "Now I can stop worrying," he said. "Now I know you will all be taken care of." The autumn of 1920 was spectacular, the aspens turning gold earlier than usual, the air crisp and clear. They had a good harvest, the third since the war ended, and there was a sense of optimism in the air, a feeling that maybe the worst was behind them. On a cool evening in late October, Eliza and Nate sat on their porch watching the moon rise, just as they had done so many times before. The grandchildren were inside, being put to bed by their various parents. The ranch was quiet except for the distant sound of cattle and the rustle of wind through grass. "This never gets old," Nate said softly, "sitting here with you watching the moon come up. It was under a moon like this that I finally said yes to you. I remember thinking that if I could just have this, have you, everything else would be worth it. All the hard work, all the struggle, it would all be worth it if I had you. And was it worth it?" He turned to look at her and his expression was tender. Every single moment, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones because we faced them together. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you so much, sometimes I cannot believe how lucky I am. We are both lucky." He stood and extended his hand. "Dance with me. There is no music. We do not need music. We never have." So they danced there on the porch under the autumn moon, moving slowly in the darkness, and Eliza thought that this was what happiness looked like. Not fireworks or grand gestures, but this quiet moment of connection, of two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other through everything life brought. When they finally went inside, Nate complained of being tired, more tired than usual. Eliza helped him to bed, and he fell asleep almost immediately, his breathing deep and steady. She lay beside him for a long time, listening to that breathing, memorizing the sound of it. Some instinct she could not name made her reluctant to sleep, made her want to stay awake and present, as if by bearing witness she could ward off whatever darkness she sensed approaching. But eventually exhaustion claimed her, and she drifted off with Nate's hand in hers. When she woke in the early hours of the morning, his hand was cold. Nate had died in his sleep, peacefully and without pain, slipping away from the world while the woman he loved lay beside him. The doctor, when he came, said it was his heart, that it had simply stopped. At 67, he had lived a good long life by frontier standards, and he had died in his own bed surrounded by everything he had built. Eliza knew all of this. She understood it rationally, but grief does not care about rationality. The funeral was enormous. People came from across the territory, ranchers and cowboys and townspeople, all wanting to pay their respects to a man who had been respected and loved. They told stories of Nate's kindness, his honesty, his dry humor. They spoke of how he had helped them in times of trouble, how his word had always been good, how the territory was poorer for his loss. Eliza stood through it all in a kind of daze, accepting condolences with automatic politeness while her mind screamed that this could not be real. Nate could not be gone. They were supposed to have more time. He had promised her more time. Her children surrounded her, solid and present, but even their love could not fill the vast hole that had opened in her world. She had lost her partner, her love, her best friend. The person who had known her better than anyone, who had loved her at her worst and celebrated her at her best. At night, she lay in their bed alone and felt the emptiness of it like a physical ache. She reached for him in her sleep and woke to find only cold sheets. She heard something funny and turned to tell him before remembering he was not there to hear it. The days blurred together. She moved through them mechanically, doing what needed to be done because she was still the matriarch of this family, still responsible. But inside, she was hollow. Catherine stayed with her, sleeping in her old room, checking on her mother constantly. "Mama, you need to eat. I am not hungry. Mama, you need to rest. I cannot sleep. Mama, please, please what? Please stop grieving, please move on. Please accept that the person she had loved for over 40 years was simply gone." William tried in his own way, handling all the business matters, making sure the ranch continued to run smoothly. Samuel came from back east and stayed for weeks, his quiet presence a comfort. Grace painted a portrait of Nate from memory, capturing something essential in his expression that made Eliza weep when she saw it. The autumn turned to winter, and Eliza continued to exist in her fog of grief. She sat on the porch even when it was cold, wrapped in blankets, staring at the land Nate had loved so much. It was there that Catherine found her one evening in early December, sitting in the cold with snow beginning to fall around her. "Mama, you will freeze." Catherine wrapped another blanket around her shoulders. "Come inside." "He waited 3 harvests for me to say yes," Eliza said, her voice distant. 3 years I made him wait because I was too afraid to take a risk, and now he is gone and all I can think is that I wasted those 3 years. We could have had 3 more years together if I had not been such a coward. Catherine knelt beside her mother's chair. "You were not a coward, you were careful, and Mama, he never regretted waiting. He told me once that every day with you was worth the wait, that he would have waited 10 years if that was what it took. He said that, he did. And Mama, you gave him 34 happy years. You built this ranch together. You raised 4 children who love you. You gave him grandchildren who adored him. You filled his life with love and purpose. Those 3 years of waiting are nothing compared to everything else." Eliza wanted to believe her, but the grief was too fresh, too raw. "I miss him so much. I do not know how to do this without him." "You do not have to do it alone. We are all here. We will help you through this." And they did. Slowly, painfully, Eliza began to resurface from her grief. She would never stop missing Nate, never stop reaching for him in the night, but she learned to carry the loss rather than being crushed by it. She threw herself into her grandchildren, finding purpose in helping shape the next generation. She taught them to read and to do sums, told them stories of their grandfather, made sure they understood where they came from and what had been sacrificed to build this place. She kept meticulous records of the ranch's operations, her sharp mind still capable even as her body aged. She advised William on major decisions, her experience invaluable. And sometimes, on clear autumn evenings, she would sit on the porch and watch the moon rise, and she would talk to Nate as if he was still beside her. She told him about the children, about the grandchildren, about how the ranch was doing. She told him she loved him, that she always would, that she was grateful for every moment they had shared years past. Eliza grew older, her hair turning white, her movements slow and careful, but her mind remained sharp and her love for her family never wavered. In 1925, she held her first great-grandchild, Catherine's grandson, and felt the circle of life continuing. In 1928, she celebrated her 70th birthday surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, so many of them that they filled the house to bursting. She watched William's son take over more of the ranch operations, seeing Nate in the young man's careful stewardship of the land. She watched Catherine's daughter become a teacher, passing on knowledge to another generation. She saw her legacy spreading outward in ways she had never imagined that terrified young woman could have created. In the spring of 1930, Eliza became ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, progressed to fever and weakness. The doctor came, looked grave, spoke of pneumonia and her age and how there was only so much that could be done. "How long?" Eliza asked him directly. "Weeks, maybe less. I am sorry, Mrs. Brennan." She was not afraid. She had lived 72 years, had loved deeply and been loved in return, had built something that would outlast her. If this was her time, she would meet it with grace. Catherine wanted her to fight, to try every possible treatment, but Eliza gently refused. "Sweetheart, I am tired. I have had a good long life, longer than many, but I am ready to rest now. I am ready to see your father again. Mama, please. I need you to let me go. I need you to know that I am at peace with this." They brought all the children to say goodbye. William, stoic and strong until the moment he hugged his mother, then breaking down completely. Samuel, quiet and sad, thanking her for everything she had taught him. Grace, bringing her latest painting to hang where her mother could see it. And Catherine, her fierce eldest daughter, trying so hard to be strong and failing beautifully. The grandchildren came too, and the great-grandchildren, so many faces looking at her with love. "You gave us everything," William told her. "You and Pa, you gave us everything." "We gave you a foundation," Eliza corrected gently. "But you all built your own lives on it. We are proud of you, all of you." In her final days, they moved her bed near the window so she could see the land stretching out endlessly under the Montana sky. She drifted in and out of consciousness, and in her lucid moments, she spoke to Nate as if he was there beside her. "I am coming soon," she whispered. "Wait for me just a little longer." On a warm May evening, with the window open and the scent of prairie grass drifting in, surrounded by her children, Eliza Thornton Brennan took her last breath. She was buried beside Nate on a hillside overlooking the ranch they had built together. The entire community turned out for the funeral, wanting to pay their respects to a woman who had helped shape the territory into something more civilized while never losing her own fierce independence. At the graveside, Catherine read from a letter Eliza had written to be opened after her death. "To my beloved children and grandchildren and all who come after. I was once a frightened young woman who nearly let fear rob her of the greatest joy she would ever know. Your father, your grandfather, loved me enough to wait while I found my courage, and when I finally did, he gave me a life beyond anything I had imagined possible. We built this ranch together, but more importantly, we built a family, a legacy of love and hard work and perseverance. That is my gift to you, not the land, though I hope you will treasure it, but the example of what two people can create when they choose to face the world together. Love deeply. Work hard. Take risks on things that matter, and never, ever let fear keep you from saying yes to the life you want. I love you all. I am proud of you all, and I will be watching over you along with your grandfather for all the days to come." There was not a dry eye at the graveside when Catherine finished reading. The ranch continued for generations after that, passed down through the family, growing and changing with the times but maintaining its essential character. Great-grandchildren told their children about the woman who had almost let fear win, about the man who had waited 3 harvests for her answer, about the love that had built an empire of grass and sky and cattle. On autumn evenings, when the moon rose golden over Montana, people swore they could sometimes see 2 figures on the old porch, dancing slowly in the darkness, still choosing each other across whatever divide separated the living from the dead. The house still stood after all those years, modified and expanded but fundamentally the same. The creek still ran through the property, and the aspens still turned gold in the fall. The land remembered, as land does, the people who had loved it and worked it and built their lives upon it. And in the family records, carefully preserved, was the story of Nate and Eliza, the cowboy who waited and the woman who finally found the courage to say yes. It was a story told and retold, a reminder that the best things in life are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth taking risks for. Because in the end, love was what mattered, not the size of the ranch or the number of cattle or the money in the bank. Love was what lasted, what echoed through the generations, what made all the struggle and sacrifice worthwhile. Nate had waited 3 harvests for Eliza's answer. She had finally said yes under an autumn moon, and from that yes had sprung a legacy that would endure as long as the prairie grass grew and the Montana sky stretched wide and blue overhead. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.